Oh, and good evening and welcome. So it's a Monday night live. It's a bit late. It's 10:42. But what a day! What a day! And I've got Bonzo, our political commentator, just with me. So, did you
Yes,
tune? Did you
yes, just about because it's getting near my bedtime.
did you tune in to the Public Accounts Committee session today, where it was a bit of a free for all? We didn't have just one person in the dock. We had Mr. Dr. Allenson, Mr. Ashford,
Three, four,
and more. Five. I think there were
yes.
five.
No, I think it was five. Yes, because Allenson and Ashford, and also Greenhall, the chief secretary, and the CEOs of DHSC and DESC. So one of them was appearing virtually, Dr. Magson, our absentee CEO of DHSC, and the other one was Mr. Kinraid, I think, who was the sort of newly appointed CEO of Department of Education, Sport and Culture. Yes, it was a fraught affair, mostly a lot of waffle, and a fair amount of patronising waffle, particularly from Dr. Allinson, who was not in a mood to be questioned by his patient about how things should be done.
I think it was worth a listen, though, wasn't it? Just to put a few
Well, it was
pieces
it
of the
was
jigsaw together, wasn't it?
yes, it did give some indications, but the real smoking gun moment was when Peter Greenhill, who's on the committee, really sort of asked the $64,000 question. Really got to the nub of the matter, as you might expect from someone who used to be a Class 1 referee, actually. Oh yes, he's a very, very experienced man in black. Is Peter Greenhill. So he came to the nub of the matter and asked, were regulations available to be implemented on that Saturday, on Flip-Flop Saturday? And the answer was yes. They were there on the shelf, could be taken off, and basically all the scribbling done in about 10 minutes. Big, as you would expect, a sort of pro forma piece of legislation that any civil servant would draft, so that you have options to give to the minister. Oh, what's happened? Oh, this has come up. Oh, right. So what can we do? Well, actually, we can do this, of course. Here's the piece of paper. Just scribble here, and we'll do the rest. That's what you'd expect, instead of Ashford's protestations that somehow it needed to be drafted by magic elves.
I think if you look back, and you look back to that week running up to the proclaimed Flip-Flop Saturday, and I managed to spot just some verbiage from Rob Collister when he was on the Paul Moulton three-way show, which was, I think it was the 20th of February. And there it was saying that there are bad things happening regarding infections. But if you were out in the community, you knew on the run-up that there was possibly going to be a lockdown. I think you knew more than that, as as a business person and what have you, with the type of business that I've got, you knew to expect there was going to be a shutdown sooner or later. But it was that moment on the Saturday where they said, we'd like you to stay at home. Sunday they said, it's okay. And then that week it all went tits up. That is where the problem has lied. And I really think we didn't have an account of how that decision-making process came about. I mean, did you spot it?
No. It was very deftly avoided. Although they have said that they have said that, oh yes, we're willing to share those things, just not talk about them publicly.
But they've already
because
said
that's one.
But they've already said that there's nothing documented. Remember, I think there's a question in a few weeks ago about that. What was the advice?
There's
and they said it's just verbal.
There's nothing documented, and there's a difference here. That there is a written record because there will be minutes. It won't be completely off book. If Comyn meets to discuss something, even if it is verbally, there will be minutes taken. There will have to be a record of that. But what they don't have, of course, or what they didn't have, were documents with advice on them to consider, position papers. And that's what they mean by no documentation. We didn't have written advice saying, actually, in this situation, we need now to do X, Y, and Z. That advice was given verbally. But there will be a note of what was said. Well, there absolutely ought to be, because if there isn't, then there are even bigger questions to ask about whether Comyn can just sort of meet in a pub and decide whatever it wants without telling anybody.
It's absolutely crucial. It really is, because the general public had a verve, they had a feel about what was going to happen. And then just seeing from the Paul Moulton interview that Rob Collister, I think it was on the 20th of February, and I've just viewed it again, is that there was a general anticipation that things were going wrong. So regardless of what was happening in schools and here, there and everywhere, the sense was, what the Manx public felt was that a lockdown was inevitable. So it's just what happened at that weekend that kind of skewed it even further. That's what I can't understand, because really, by the sounds of it, on Saturday they should have just said, okay, let's just lock the door. We can put all the controls and positions around for people, not to mix, not to fraternise, not to spread COVID, and they didn't. It was just a bit of a favour, and then Sunday was just a free-for-all.
Yeah, so now they're in the awkward position of explaining their way out of it. And of course, seeing as they're never wrong, they're having to find more and more sort of elaborate ways to explain their way out of it. They're defying the old dictum of Dennis Healey. Dennis Healey, the old Chancellor of the Exchequer in the Labour government of the 70s, who invented his first law of holes: when you're in one, stop digging. Which is something that Comyn seemed to be very talented at not being able to observe.
Oh, interesting times. We'll see. I could love to see a timeline just of what has happened with the facts, just along, because it's very difficult for a member of the public, a layperson, to actually keep track of all this stuff. You've got to have a forensic eye to work out where the decisions were made, what the timeline was, what the data was. I'm just begging for maybe some scrupulous investigative journalist to tap into this.
Yes, that's the kind of thing that investigative journalists do. But of course, we don't really have that much in the way of investigative journalism on the island.
Oh, indeed. So we will watch this space, but some interesting action on the old Twitter and social media pages, and well done to those publicly concerned people who are keen on extracting the truth. Now, we've got a big day in Tynwald tomorrow. It's over 50 questions. Now, we're not confined to a timeline on this, are we?
Well, there is a time limit customarily of 2.5 hours for Tynwald questions. And the majority of those questions are for oral answer. It's 21 questions that are written, 21 questions that are for oral answer, and 25 questions for written. So with a fair wind, they ought to be able to get through them all. But Anne Corlett, fresh from her victory in the Keys of getting standing orders changed so that a simple majority could then vote for question time to be extended and get round the block vote problem, which had stopped question times being extended for most of this year. That she's now trying to change the standing orders of Tynwald so as to allow the same thing for extending question time by a simple majority of the House. So we'll see how that one goes.
Tell me, I mean, there's an array of questions. What caught your eye? Anything in particular?
Oh, but there's one particular one that I found curious, which is another one from Julie Edge, about what the government's policy is on lobbyists.
Oh yes, yeah. What can you recall? What number that was?
I think it's 16.
Oh,
if
yes.
you just give me a minute.
Yes.
If you just give me a
yes,
tick,
I've got it. Yes. What the government's policy on lobbying is? That's a belter, isn't it? So they're going to say there's no policy. There is no policy apart from the conduct of members, I'd say.
Well, it's a question of, do you actually need a policy? Because you don't exactly have to lobby. Vested interests just have an open door any damn way. The old joke about government policy being made by the Chamber of Commerce and the Institute of Directors. And and perhaps the Isle of Man Law Society as well. Well, that pretty much holds true. Oh, I was forgetting the cycling lobby as well. But
oh, go on.
No, I hadn't forgotten the cycling lobby, but there are certain groups, as we know. Oh, and the farmers, of course. Certain groups of who pretty much have a direct phone line to government. So the idea of lobbying, it just doesn't happen because it doesn't need to. Because the interest groups can just pick up the phone and say, "Can we have this? We don't like that," and things happen, or things don't, according to the way they want to. Obviously, this comes in consequence from things that are going on across.
Exactly. I've got
regarding Greensill.
Kevin has been commenting, saying that's coming from David Cameron lobbying fiasco. So that's been pointed out.
Yes, and of course, when it comes to Greensill, there is a bit of a Manx link in that. I forget the name of the firm now. But no, Liberty. Is it Liberty Steel? Yes, Liberty Steel, who are the sort of holding company for various steel interests in UK that used to be British Steel, and they were financed by Greensill Capital, and of course are no longer financed by Greensill Capital because Greensill Capital is not financing anything. So they're in a bit of shtuck, but that's a Manx company.
Really?
So
I've not picked up on that. Go on.
On Liberty Steel, yes, it's a Manx company. It's one of those many corporate entities that live at Exchange House in Athol Street.
Oh, blimey! So the Isle of Man could feature in this landscape.
So
of
yes, the Isle of Man may have a bit of a role in that. But I think Julie Edge's question is probably more widely spread rather than simply focusing on Greensill Capital and what the Isle of Man's role may be or not in that. And I think it's trying to ascertain what kind of lobbying, breadth and scale of lobbying there is of government, and who does it, and whether there is a sort of paid cadre of lobbyists In which case, could I put my CV in, please? Because I could use a nice paid lobbying post. Yeah, that'd be nice.
There's been some interesting questions about COVID. I think it must form about 20% of the questions tomorrow. And I did spot Michael Josem. He's put in a freedom of information request about a certain spreadsheet about data. So he got knocked back on the first time. So that'll be an interesting one to follow.
Oh yes, that will be interesting. I mean, there are certain other spreadsheets as well. I'm not quite sure which one he's asked for. Do you know which particular spreadsheet he's?
I think we'd have to go to his website to get the finer details, but it is something which the minister specifically referred to in one of the press conferences. So it does exist. And it'll be interesting to see if that does come to the public's attention. But
yes, but that depends on how you frame your freedom of information question. Freedom of information questions are very much a black art, because freedom of information, it's one of those things that governments love. Because freedom of information legislation allows governments to determine what information you can be given.
We should do
rather than being able to sort of challenge through the courts, etc. That various things should be made public. No government gets to say that.
We should do a show.
We'll make more things public. Of course, there might be a lot of thick redaction pen over the over the stuff, like those UFO reports that have sort of 5 words in them, and everything else is blacked out.
Honestly, we should do a show just on freedom of information. The FO show. That would be
yes, but as I was saying at the time when they were coming up with the Freedom of Information and the Freedom of Information Act, that yes, freedom of information, no. It's very much misunderstood, that the idea that somehow this act entitles you to have information. No, it doesn't. Well, it entitles you to ask for information, but it has to be in an extraordinarily specific way, so that government can't weasel out of that. And it's a bit like Bedazzled. If you remember Bedazzled.
Oh, I love Bedazzled.
Peter Cook, Dudley Moore film, where,
it.
Of course, where Dudley Moore sells his soul to the devil and he gets 6 wishes. But every time he wishes for something, he doesn't specify it quite enough, so the devil finds all sorts of ways in which to just drop him in it and make his wish a complete bloody nightmare.
You know what, Bonzo? I love that film. I absolutely adore that film, because one of them, he wants to become a pop singer, doesn't he? And remember that, and everything's like,
yes, which the great line that came out of it was, "I'm cold, I don't need you, I don't want you, you fill me with inertia." Classic Peter Cook.
Oh, I love it. And unfortunately, Raquel Welch appears.
Yeah.
Let's just move on. That is not.
Yes. Well, actually, of course, in the remake, Liz Hurley was the devil.
Should we talk about?
So moving on again. Yeah.
Should we talk about Timber questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
But besides, of course, questions, there are 26 things, actual items on the order paper, and there's another order paper, supplementary order paper number 1, which is mostly full of cleaning up in order to ease lockdown, because those orders that have been made to lift lockdown then have to go before Tynwald. So it's mostly a paper of that, although there are a couple of interesting things on the end of it. Now, this supplementary order paper was only issued yesterday. No, as in today, sorry. And it talks about reports. The Coronavirus Recovery Scheme Guidance Draft is being submitted, and also the Emergency Advisory Group Terms of Reference.
Oh.
Now, you may have heard about or heard government calling for volunteers to join this emergency advisory group.
I did look. I did look at the application.
Great and the good who have various skills pertinent to the declaration of an emergency, handling a crisis. So various external people, not merely people who have a background in sort of emergency planning, policing or something, but also logistics and business continuity, that kind of stuff. That'll be interesting to see. Of course, actually, on the order paper itself, after questions and such, there, item 4, I think, is a statement from the Chief Minister on COVID. So, we will wait to see what that is.
It's the borders, isn't it? The borders is the big question.
Will that be the borders now?
Yeah, it must be, because previously it was September is the finish line. Maybe that'll change. Yes, maybe that might be brought forward, or indeed some form of relaxation to allow relatives from across, etc., to come and visit. Because that's been a very big bone of contention. There have been people now who haven't been able to come to the Isle of Man to see their relatives for 14 months, unless they do X weeks of quarantine stuff, which makes it completely impractical so to do. There's another thing as well. Oh yes, number 6 on the order paper, the Constitutional, Legal Affairs and Justice Committee. Now, the chair of said committee, Mrs. Poole Wilson, don't forget a lawyer, to move that the Constitutional, Legal Affairs and Justice Committee's first report for the session 2021 be received, and that Tynwald is of the opinion that 1. The Manx legal system is in urgent need of reform. Oh gosh, yeah.
Well, yes, it's been in urgent need of reform. I think many of us could agree for the past 30 years, but that's, hey, better late than never. That the training system for Manx advocates is out of date and insufficient. That the system of qualification should be brought into line with that of England and Wales, and that there should be a system of practicing certificates for Manx advocates and others practicing on the island. But here we go. Essentially, a member of the Isle of Man Law Society admitting that the Isle of Man Law Society has been a law unto itself.
Well, this
been sadly lacking. And
this is the biggie, though, isn't it? This is so big because it's actually saying, look, our justice system, when it comes to the lawyers, when it comes to them, they're not competent. That's what this, there's a 10-point plan.
Well, or indeed, point 9 of this report, or point 9 of this motion, Tynwald is the opinion. Point 9, the Law Society should not be the representative body and the regulator. Well, I think that says it all, doesn't it?
Yes. I'll just think back to where we had a certain Attorney General under the microscope, and maybe the control measures didn't quite cover the outcomes, but there we go.
Yes. So that point 11, that the Council of Ministers should commission an independent review of regulation of legal services in the Isle of Man, chaired by a person who has not practiced law in the Isle of Man. So, UKQC at least. the review should consider options in this report. Development of better resources for training advocates, qualifications kept in step, separation of regulation from representation, a more transparent, user-friendly complaints system with a single point of entry that's able to provide proper guidance as to the standard of conduct expected of all lawyers practicing on the Isle of Man. And the review should report by July 2022. Yeah, that's going to be a biggie.
This is in tandem with the power of our Tynwald Ombudsman. It's in tandem with the Auditor General position that was agreed on in 2011 and still hasn't been facilitated. This is in tandem with powerless Office of Fair Trading that don't represent the consumer. They don't represent the likes of you and me when we're aggrieved. This is in tandem with our completely weak and ineffective police complaints process, where they're not regulated, where anything is allowed to happen. Basically, we've got police officers being sent to prison, and there doesn't seem to be any feedback about that. It's incredible. It's almost like the Isle of Man is out of control in this aspect.
Well, or was it ever in control? I think is the question. But as I said, when you have a member of in a relatively senior lawyer, albeit an employment lawyer rather than a criminal lawyer, like Jane Paul Wilson, saying that actually the whole thing is a complete mess, needs sorting out and needs sorting out absolutely urgently, because it's a steaming pile of horse manure. But that also then comes to the germane idea of September elections, because of course many of the returning officers, indeed I think all of the returning officers, aren't they, are advocates. And of course some of them made such a marvellous job of being a returning officer in the last election that they had to resign as president of the Law Society.
Was it Pizzagate or something? I can't remember now.
Yes, Pizzagate. Yes, where pizza was brought in and then, oh dear, we lost count. Oh, yes, 300 votes or something sort of went missing over there, and well, these things happen, don't they? We found them in the end. It didn't really change the result. Yes, it's just maddening. Which actually goes on to another piece on the order paper, which I think is talking about observers for the the elections. Yes, item 16, election observation on the September general election. Member of Garth, Mr. Perkins, to move Council of Ministers should consider inviting a Commonwealth Parliamentary Association election observation team for the September election, should report to the July sitting of Tynwald. Well, I think there was such an CPA observers team last time, and yeah, they really seemed to observe things quite well, didn't they? Yeah, so I'm not entirely sure about that, but now there's another one.
So
as well.
potentially our election process could be racked with fraud. Is that what they're saying? That's absolutely terrifying.
Well, it's not so much fraud as a lack of competence, which then is very difficult to question, and you have to then have financial resources in order to bring it to law, in order to be questioned. I don't think there's really any sort of ballot box stuffing or voter intimidation or anything like that. Although people, as I think we've said before, know how to game the system. And that's why, of course, we haven't had change when we've expected it, because the vested interests have known how to keep things as they are. Thank you very much.
But it's an uncomfortable motion to be put into the court, isn't it? Really, I read that, and I'm not happy.
It's not something. It's not something a Parliament really likes to say, is it? Actually, do you know what? One of our one of the pillars of an operating democratic society is a heap of dogs droppings and doesn't work.
Precisely.
There's another thing as well. Oh yes, which just came to my eye. Item 14: adoption of Confederation of Passenger Transport Code by Bus Vannin. Mr. Thomas to move that Tynwald is of the opinion that Bus Vannin should adopt the voluntary code of best practice for bus operators developed jointly by the Confederation of Passenger Transport and UK Department of Transport as the industry standard for the use and acceptance of approved mobility scooters intended for footpath or pavement use only with a maximum speed limit of 4 miles an hour in order to help people with mobility difficulties to use low floor buses that are adapted to carry wheelchairs. Now, that's Eddie Power, isn't it?
No, Eric Corkish is the guy.
Eric Corkish.
Eric Corkish from Ramsey.
Yeah, yes. So Eric Corkish again, may actually be, be winning on that one. So who knows? We shall see.
But hang on, let's just roll back there about Bus Vannin. When has ever the strategy of Bus Vannin ever been debated in the House of Keys? When? So, has it ever been determined by, the democratic vote as to what they are trying to achieve? Because I'll tell you now, it hasn't. It hasn't at all. This incredible expenditure on buses, this out of control business. Is it a plan? I don't know. But this has never been debated by the politicians. And yet we get something about one person who has got a grievance about a scooter basically going on a bus. And this has managed to land on the top landing. Yet the real deal, where it must be £10 million a year expenditure, is at the hands of some chief executives.
Yes, well, Bus Vannin's ins and outs have been going on for quite some time, ever since I got back to the island. There was, of course, it's so long ago now. I think it was 2012, the Bendy buses, when they were brought to the island and then found to be totally unsuitable, thankfully. So that then they went to Malta, and that's when they were found to be totally unsuitable to be there, because they kept breaking, yes, they kept bursting into flames and things. But that was something that was, oh yes, we must do this. Yes, we must have all these Bendy buses. No, you can't get the run. I remember one of them got jammed, I think, didn't it, by Castle Russian?
That's right. That's right, yeah.
Yes, so I think Bus Vannin has been something of a law unto itself, and yes, yet another thing that questions need to be asked. But we can't ask those sort of things, and you have to understand that Bus Vannin is it's a sort of demi-social service, really. It's not actually an operating passenger transport entity. It doesn't quite operate like that.
Well, on the same token,
it's there for social obligations.
On the same token, if they just fired, say, £1 million at a grant system for taxis to transform to electric vehicles with power points at the airport, and maybe just change the fares, life could have been so much easier. But instead, they've gone the other direction, and it's a flipping mess. Unbelievable.
Oh yes, well indeed. Things like fare-free public transport, for example. Notice I say fare-free, not free public transport, because nothing ever is. But it's not pay. The user isn't charged at the point of use. Like the health service.
Yeah.
And that would, along with those things for electrification of cabs and stuff that you were mentioning. I mean, that would produce a good deal of progress. But of course, we can't have that kind of innovation, can we?
No, not at all.
No, not until we've thought about it for 10 years and it's sort of become historic. And speaking of historic, Jason Morehouse with his motion on the armed schooner Peggy.
Oh, which one is that? Let me just pick that out.
17.
Oh, yes. Yeah, is the Peggy too big for the museum?
The delay in returning the armed schooner Peggy to public display in Castletown.
It was removed in 2015. So I have actually brought tourists to the Peggy Museum, and then they've got to the lower floor and realised there's no boat there.
Yes. Invisible boat.
Incredible.
But that's again, it's the I don't know. You tell me. And of course, he still isn't letting go on this item 18, Senior Race Day.
Oh.
He's fighting a valiant rearguard action to try and keep Senior Race Day on Friday, June the 11th, my birthday, actually.
Remember that.
So yes, remember that. So that's a good thing. Now, one of the reasons why he's doing this, not simply because of the fact that he's got his teeth into it and won't give up, is that the order that actually implements this, which is the I have to go back up to the further down the order paper. Is the Bank Holidays Act 1969, and an order being made on that. If we look back up the order paper, back at the order paper again, trying desperately to look at it, look for it. Yes, because I think it's in the supplementary order paper. No, here we are, page 3. Bank Holiday Act 1989. Sorry, the Bank Holidays Amendment Order 2021. Now that's coming before Tynwald, and that is the one that says no Senior Race Day. We're having another day's bank holiday, Supermanx bank holiday instead. Now that's having to be laid before Tynwald. It was signed off by Cannon in March, but of course these things then have to be ratified by Tynwald. So I suppose he might be trying to press for a vote on that.
Okay.
Which of course he wouldn't pass, because of course a block vote would be used. But that may be part of his cunning plan on that. And then, down the on item 19, the DHSC complaints process. Long overdue an overhaul, and recognises that this is a departmental priority. Recognises the need for effective complaints process for both DHSC and Manx Care. Again, Manx Telephone. Yes, and Jason Morehouse again, talking about the marvellous reports of red telephone boxes. Yeah.
Surely this can be sorted out away from the chamber. This is ridiculous. These aren't national issues unless you've got such a bad response. Surely, like a confirmation with Manx Telecom, just to say, look, what the hell are you doing with these things, and then come back to the chamber.
Yes,
it's not national politics.
No, but this is one of the problems that we have with Tynwald and the Keys, and that we have things come in which are more the sort of province of a local council or a parish council, and then you have matters of national and international importance, which then they sit side by side on the same order paper. Such as, 22, the next item, where Mr. Speaker moves that Tynwald on charity banking services commends the work of small charities and calls upon Treasury to bring forward legislation to make basic banking services free of charge for registered charities and not-for-profit clubs and associations, and calls on the Financial Services Authority to determine a mechanism to ensure that all registered banks on the island undertake a fair share of the administration of small charities.
Interesting. So I think we'll have to tune in at 10 o'clock tomorrow. Because there are some good questions.
All that and, yes, with all that and all the items that they're having to get through on the order paper, again, I would think they ought to be able to do it in 2 days. But it just depends on how much people contest various issues and add supplementary questions, etc., into debating these motions. So it could even spill into 3. It depends, but it's certainly a good full couple of days' work there.
Interesting. It's all being crammed in at the last minute, isn't it?
Well, indeed, yes. So if you're a member of TIM, and of course they're being crammed in the chamber.
They are, and it's almost like it's points scoring, a sort of a taste of desperation. Is this something which the MHKs are going to be like holding up and say, well, I did this, I fought for this particular cause, and this is what I did in Tynwald.
Oh, yes.
Really, there's a vacant 4 years.
Yeah. Oh, yes, but there'll be certainly a lot of that, because, of course, we have the election coming in September, and, of course, Tynwald being in the chamber, not only, of course, will be on audio being broadcast on Manx Radio, and also you can get it on live feed from the Tynwald website, but also, of course, questions will be being videoed. So you'll then see them on Isle of Man TV. So there'll be a fair amount of grandstanding, I should imagine.
Excellent. Well, we're coming up to 48 minutes, Bonzo. I think that is time enough. It's getting on a bit. It's a bit late start tonight. Thank you for tuning in and giving the comments in the box. It's been great. But I think, Bonzo, I'll hold you down to this. We need to have a bit of a follow-up on the answers that were given. Would you be agreeable to that?
Oh, I think certainly, yes. We need to follow this up. There's a lot here, and a lot that's going to come out of it. It's going to take quite some teasing out.
Brilliant. Okay, well, if you can just sign us off with a bit of John Peel, it'll make our evening much lighter.
Well, it's been very tiring and emotional and tiring. But with the developments that we've had over the past 48 hours, Bill Shankly would, be spinning, quite frankly. As he said, football isn't a matter of life and death. It's far more important than that.
Oh, you beauty. Every time. Thank you so much.